Welcome to the Moulding Health Show. Our goal is to leverage the wisdom and experience of healthcare practitioners to set you on a path of self-discovery and healing. These insights, coupled with a multidisciplinary approach to each area of interest, should provide an invaluable resource to everyone looking for a better approach to health. In this episode of the show, we speak to Annelet Prinsloo about music therapy. Annelet Prinsloo, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you on board. And talking about music therapy, again, she has kind of outdid herself by finding something really unique, but I'm really glad to unpack this. Welcome on board.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Pleasure is always ours. And I know I kind of get, it seems like it's always weird when I say that, but it's always, our pleasure, because I think even with this, it's such a unique, space. And, I don't know if anyone's heard of like a music therapist, but I'm so happy to get into this with you. But before I do, we spoke about it just before the show, but Shaz, how did you even find Annelet and get her to be on the show?
So in fairness, I actually found Annelet on Facebook. I was looking for something for my niece who's into dancing and that kind of stuff. And just based on my search phrase, a post of Annelet's came up about music therapy. And I kind of took a double take and went, okay, I've never heard of music therapy. So I'm really keen to see how this works. I sent her a message and almost immediately she came back and said she would love to be on the show.
That's such a cool story. Thanks for doing that, Annelet.
You're more than welcome. I love talking about what I do.
We're glad, for the experience as well. So, not to keep everyone in suspense. Tell us, what is music therapy and how does it differ from the other? We know the normal ones, obviously a psychologist and the various, modalities there, dietitian, occupational therapist, physiotherapist. Where does a music therapist fit in?
It's actually such a loaded question you're asking.
Okay.
Because music therapy is a very broad field, and there are numerous definitions of what music therapy is. While if you look at a speech therapist or occupational therapist, it's people who the word of speech therapy tells you, okay, so it's a therapist who works with speech. Or occupational therapy, it's somebody who works with your activities of daily living. But music therapy, I don't fix people's music. So I can give you a broad definition of music therapy, and that is where somebody uses music and are clinically trained to music to reach goals, therapeutic goals, clinical goals with music, using music as a tool to reach those goals. That is basically in a nutshell. But those goals can be behavioral, it can be psychological, it can be medical, it's very broad. So that's why there are so many different definitions as well, because every music therapist focuses on what they do, and then they will tell you what it is according to their viewpoint, their framework of reference, their framework of music therapy that they work with.
I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that summarizes it perfectly, in terms of how that works. But like you said, therapist obviously should point you in the right direction. So I wanted to ask something. So we've had an OT on board and she spoke about Hippo Therapy. So that's like working with horses, like as a medium or a way to connect with patients and help them. So would that be similar to what you're saying now? So like music being a way that you're connecting with patients and being able to help them?
To a degree, yes. Yes, music therapists work from the standpoint that every single person has an innate music talent. So every single person is innately musical. If you think of the rhythm of your heartbeat, the rhythm of your breath, everything of what we as humans do has a musical quality to it. So we connect to that musical quality of your being and use that for therapy.
Okay,
Does
I'm
that
so
make
glad you,
sense?
yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that as well, because that's something fundamental that I always thought. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that is because it's like, it's amazing that when you know good music and non-good music, and I'm talking about the sound, and so when you hear like a car radio system, normally, it's just like loaded with bass and, like it just doesn't sound so nice. But when you hear like a good audio system, like people inherently just know it's like good. I don't know how that works, but what you said now kind of makes a lot of sense. Does that make sense in terms of how I'm relaying that?
To a degree, it depends on what kind of music therapy you're looking at. So you get two techniques, if you can say, and there's active music therapy and receptive. So active is where you physically make music with your client. With instruments, it's very active. And by making music, you're using the music that your client makes. And it's not a music as in being a musician. It's almost communicating musically. So the music that your client makes tells you in what state of mind and what frame of reference and where your client is coming from. And then as a therapist, you will then join that in a communication. It's very much about relationship. So you would, as a music therapist, play a piece of music and the client would listen to it, of course. And then you would use that music for different means and ends. So I understand what you mean about the sound systems and the good quality and the bad quality. But in music therapy, everything is accepted. So good quality and bad quality. We don't believe in bad quality music. We believe in every sound as an expression of yourself, as an expression of who you are.
That makes sense. Shaz, you had something?
Yeah, I was going to say, Annelet, I'm really glad that you mentioned it that way, that there are different types of music therapy and that, sometimes it's active, sometimes it's receptive. Are there any other types of music therapy and which would be used for different types of situations? I'm assuming that you might use one type of music therapy for a more anxious person versus a different type of music for somebody who might be having a self-confidence issue, not quite anxious, but just not confident. Am I correct with that?
You are correct with that. There are, as I said, there are many different frameworks that music therapists work from. So that means that there are very many different types of music therapy, but all of them employ either active or receptive or both techniques. In South Africa, we are trained very much in what is called creative music therapy. That is very active. It's all based on play and creating and improvising music. And we're also trained in receptive, in focusing on imagery and bringing imagery to mind, because if you think when you're listening to a piece of music, it always brings thoughts and it brings emotions and it brings, so that is very much what we're trained in. Just speaking about the training, the only place that you can be trained for music therapy is at the University of Pretoria. That's the only place in South Africa where you can receive the training. And it's a master's degree that you have to complete in order to be accepted by the HPCSA. So if you look at the different types of music therapy, you have to look at the areas of practice. So music therapists work in schools, they work in clinics, they work in hospitals, they work in residential centers like old age homes. I worked for very long in a home for people with physical and intellectual disabilities, nursing homes, daycare centers, hospices. You get palliative music therapy, community music therapy, so people work in the communities, and then, of course, private practices. So all of the areas of practice is what informs what type of music therapy you do. So I've spoken about creative music therapy, which is very active. It's very improvisational. So you improvise and you work on the creation between you and your client in working on either behavioral issues or psychological issues. It all depends on what the client needs. Then you have behavioral music therapy, which is very much based in cognitive behavioral therapy, where I don't know if you know what cognitive behavioral, it's very much stimulus response. And you use the music as a stimulus to elicit a response from the client. That's very basic crux of behavioral music therapy. You have music therapy in special education, where the music therapists help the students to gain non-musical knowledge and skills that can help them to learn how to act within a group of people, to help with their education, with their development, with their adaptation. So it's to help the special needs kids to achieve academic or adaptive goals of special education. You have instructional music therapy, and here you actually work on the client's music, but you use it to reach different therapeutic goals. So it's almost like a music lesson, but you use the music lesson to reach therapeutic goals. Then you have music activity therapy, where you actually get music activities, like if you dance to a piece of music. And these specific music activities are designed to reach specific goals, either educational or improving adaptive behavior or develop knowledge or skills. You get medical music therapy, where the music therapists work in hospitals specifically. And the medical music therapy is very much focused on medical treatments and supporting the clients through medical treatments, and providing music therapy, for instance, throughout pregnancy and childbirth, to help the mother to actually cope with this very new thing in her life. And during labor, to actually, instead of having the mother listening to pieces of music, actually being there, and with the relationship that you formed, therapeutic relationship that you formed with the mother, to actually help the mother through the labor. I worked in pediatric oncology at Steve Biko, where I worked with the children with cancer diagnoses, and to help them process this terrible diagnosis, to help them actually feel normal while they're staying in a hospital surrounded by sick people. Also helping the mothers, the parents who have to deal with these terrible things that's happening to their children. There's music therapy in America. I haven't heard of it in South Africa yet, because we are so few. In the premature ICU for premature babies, where the music therapists actually help the mother and child with attachment, because it's very difficult if this child is in a, oh my goodness, now I can't remember the English word, a broeikas.
Incubator.
Thank you. An incubator. And where, how does the mother connect with her child? And then through music therapy, we can help the mother with attachment issues. We help the child. There's been research showing that music therapy with premature babies who are in incubators, thank you, Shaz, actually help these babies to reduce the length of hospital stay, to increase their oxygen saturation, to actually increase and improve their physical signs and physical symptoms, to help them to get healthy quicker. Sure, I'm sorry, I get so excited when I talk about music therapy that I start talking over myself and I start jumbling.
That's exactly what we love in the show, is just to be able to showcase the passion that specialists have for their fields. And you can very clearly see that you're passionate about what you do. And, you know, it is such a vast field, but even within such a vast field, there's so many different specialities. So I'm going to go down one of these rabbit holes. You mentioned almost dancing as part of music therapy. So anybody who's watched Grey's Anatomy tends to know that after they've had a really rough day or so on, Meredith will always say to the guys or girls, come on, we've got to dance it out. Would that almost be like that cognitive behavioral, instead of taking the bad day home, we're going to dance it out now and, you know, be able to just wash the day off us before heading home to our families?
I wouldn't call it cognitive behavioral, because it's dancing doesn't really involve your thinking mind. It's more experiential. It's your body, and that's what music also is. It's experiential. It uses your senses, and by dancing something out, you're actually physically expressing that which you are feeling. Does that make sense? So it helps you to creatively express and experience, not just in your mind and in your heart, but in your body, to embody a feeling. And that's what dancing does. And that's why music therapists, we also use movement within our sessions to not just use the mind and the ears, but actually embody a feeling. It all depends on what the client needs, of course, but we can use movement for embodiment.
Okay, so I think so far, I mean, we definitely established there's different ways of working, and obviously, and there's a way that clients benefit from this. I think the two parts that I just want to make sure we hone in on is at what point, or actually before that, is like how would you normally help, just say like, with the pregnancy one, because normally in my mind, again, this is, more me, in my mind, I have like, they would then speak to a psychologist or so. So how would the music therapist be different? And then secondly is, how would they know that they need the music therapist? I think that's the part that I'm, also not quite clear about. I mean, like, so who would refer to the music therapist and say, actually, I don't think you should go down the psychology route. You need to go down the music therapy route because this is probably a better fit for you. Because in my mind, I'm very clear, like, dietitian, okay, food related, you need issues, like you need help with that. How does that make sense?
It does make sense. So music therapy is very nonverbal. We don't use talk so much. Of course, you can process emotions and you can process feelings verbally after a session or during a session. But I would say for those emotions and those things that are really difficult to talk about, and that you actually sometimes, because it's nonverbal, it's more subconscious. So sometimes when you go to a psychologist, you feel you talk, but you're not getting anywhere. And then I would say go for music therapy. If you're talking of people who are very, sorry, now I'm looking for my words. if you're
you can say it in Afrikaans, Shaz will translate for us. But
somebody who doesn't have any psychological difficulties or diagnoses, somebody who's high functioning, a high functioning person. Then I would say if you're looking at psychology and you're looking at music therapy, I would say go for the nonverbal route. If you feel that you're not getting to the root of things with talking, then go to a music therapist. And music therapy work very much in multidisciplinary teams. So we work with psychologists, we work with psychiatrists, we work with physiotherapists, we work with OTs, and by taking hands together with these different modalities, we can actually reach aims and goals easier and faster and support each other.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, go for it.
Sorry, I thought that it might perhaps help you to understand how music therapy works.
Mm-hmm.
To know if it's something that you could go to or not. So we work very much on what's a very big basis of music therapy is what I said earlier, is about the innate musicality. So there's a concept called communicative musicality. And communicative musicality has its roots in mother-infant communication. So in that space of absolute safety where a baby cannot talk yet, in that space of absolute safety, there is a very intimate, very primal, very instinctual communication between a mother and a child. And the mother instinctively knows what the child wants. And when it's a term called motherese, like how a mother talks to her baby, and it's non-verbal. You use sounds and you use facial expressions and so music therapy is very much based on that. It's based on creating the safe environment and finding that primal, that instinctual inside yourself, non-verbal mode of communication, which everybody has. So in order to reach that, we use what it's called the ISO principle. Now, the ISO principle comes from where you attune. Now, attuning to somebody is you attune to their mood, to their state of being, to how they present. And so the therapist will literally either if you are actively just beating a drum or just shaking a shaker or just singing or talking, a therapist will attune to what this person is presenting with and match what this person is presenting with in order to get to that space of safety and that feeling of I'm being heard. I feel like I'm talking a jumble of words and things and maybe not always making myself very clear, but it's all about reaching that relationship space of the client feeling I'm being heard without saying something. I'm being heard and I'm being seen and I'm being held and I'm being contained, and it doesn't matter what I bring. It doesn't matter whether I'm disabled, I cannot talk, or whether I cannot physically do something. Maybe the client is wheelchair bound or bed bound, or the music therapist actually looks past those disabilities and finds the ability and the presenting of the human being, looking past the outside, going to what the person is.
I like how I like how you explained that, and that's why I want to be very clear with it, because obviously we want to help as many people as we can, and this is groundbreaking for us, definitely, in terms of understanding, because we've been working with healthcare practitioners for over 8 years now, and it's definitely not a discipline that we come across often, to be honest, and if we don't come across it often, then it means it's obviously like there's definitely a space for it, but it's, for me, the point of this show is like, why would you then, how would you use music therapy then to help patients? I think so when patients are looking for it as well, they can actually say, I do need to speak to Annelet, because I remember hearing that episode, and it sounds like my child can benefit from that, or my sister who's going through a difficult pregnancy maybe can can use that. But I think the one term that came from that, Annelet, was the non-verbal. So probably if it's non-verbal and you're finding difficulties with communication, and I agree with you completely. I mean, everyone communicates, like through the centuries, through generations. People didn't always, have the written word or the spoken word. Sometimes it was, pictures, hieroglyphics, whatever that was conveyed, was communication. So I like what that is. So I think, is that a good way to explain it as well then? So in a multidisciplinary team, if you're finding a patient that is struggling to communicate and just can't break through, those were your words, I think. So I'm just,
Yes.
recapping it.
Yes.
It's then there's definitely a space for a music therapist to maybe help. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is very much in the psychological realm, but music therapists also work very much with, when we speak of nonverbal, with children with special needs. So with people living with autism or cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or developmental delays. And a lot of these people and children cannot speak. And that is where music therapy comes in, because how do you reach somebody who cannot speak, somebody who's nonverbal? And I know a lot of parents struggle with not being able to reach their child because this child is nonverbal. You don't know how to communicate with your child. And that is where music therapy comes in. Music therapy is a unique way of communication with a nonverbal person, somebody who cannot speak. And if you have family sessions, you can actually help the parent with the communication with the child. And a lot of times there's an attachment relationship problem between the parent and the child with special needs, because the parent don't know how to relate to their child because they cannot speak. So you can work on the attachment relationships to actually help the child to form secure attachments with their parents. A lot of these children who are living with disabilities are living inside a world where they're not seen for being the whole person who they are. And music therapy actually hones into what this person is, who this person is, what's this person's abilities. Even I had clients who had cerebral palsy, and with the tone of their muscles. So with cerebral palsy, when the tone actually pulls in their hands and their whole bodies, so they are spastic, they literally cannot move without pain, and they cannot move. And actually finding the space for that child to be able to make music, to be able to use your voice in a way to be heard, is absolutely amazing, to actually see how that child transforms because they're being heard, because they're seen, because their abilities are being celebrated. So that's very much within special needs what music therapy can achieve, and a lot more, because you can then start focusing on emotional healing. Because just because somebody is disabled and cannot talk and cannot express themselves doesn't mean that they don't experience all the same emotions, all the same needs that we as able-bodied people do. So music therapy finds that niche and finds the space to help the people who cannot express what they want and express what they need, to actually find a voice and express what they need. And start with healing, start with imaging, start with finding identities. You need to start with identity creation. Sometimes it's self-built self-image, to actually help them to promote their self-image, to actually start feeling that I am a person, I am worthy, I am good enough. So a lot of able-bodied people don't even feel that I'm worthy or I'm good enough. So what about disabled people who are being dismissed by the able-bodied world? So yes, you can focus in on that as well. So it's not just highly functioning people and psychologically that we work. We work with a lot of disabilities as well, if you want to call it disabilities. We also work with people with Alzheimer's and dementia, where it actually focuses in on how music works in the brain and how music activates all the different parts of the brain. And some of the research that has been done shows that the part of the brain where music is stored and music memory is stored is one of the last parts of the brain that's being affected by Alzheimer's and dementia. So through music, you can reach the person who has Alzheimer's and dementia and who cannot be reached any other way. So it is such a broad field. It's such a wide field. And I get so excited about all the different ways that music can help people that I want to talk about all of them.
Annelet, I think the most amazing thing just from that last section there is that through music therapy, a nonverbal person actually can be given a voice.
Yes.
And I think that's, for any parent who does have a nonverbal child or any adult who's now got a nonverbal family member due to traumatic brain injury or that kind of thing, music and music therapy can be used to actually give that person a voice again, a way for them to express themselves, their feelings, their emotions, which again just helps to heal that person and bring them into a state where, like you said, that they're not forgotten and overlooked because this has happened or because they were born this way, but there is now a voice that can be used for them. So, just going down a bit of a rabbit hole, I follow a woman on TikTok whose son is now 14, who has Sanfilippo disease. So he started to regress. He's got the mental capacity of a 9 to 18-month-old. But she said as well, for them, what they found was they needed to find a way for Logan to have his own voice, because as he regressed and became nonverbal, he couldn't communicate when he was hungry or when he was sore or when he was tired. And so music therapy would be able to give a child like that the ability to just communicate the basics. Hey, Mom, I'm hungry, or, I have a tummy ache. I think it's absolutely phenomenally amazing.
Speaking of traumatic brain injury, what you said earlier, there's also been a lot of work in music therapy with people who had a stroke or had traumatic brain injury who is suffering from aphasia. So aphasia is people whose brain center for talking has been affected and they cannot talk anymore. And how people with aphasia can actually sing and they can sing words. And you can actually use that through music therapy to help with the rehabilitation of learning to talk again. There are studies of how people who had a stroke and who had aphasia due to the stroke learned to talk through music therapy, which I also think is absolutely amazing.
That is amazing, and I like the story that Shaz mentioned. I was going to talk about another story. I know a family, and I think they're in Cape Town now. Not Cape Town, Canada. And their little girl had issues, talking, and she had I'm gonna not do it justice, but she had issues where almost like it was like the bulging of the eye. It looked, like not good and stuff like that. But she couldn't talk, and they used sign language. But and there was only way that the child could communicate to the parents even. But what I found though was that, the parents had to learn sign language as well in order for communication. I mean, you always have sender, medium, receiver, and that's how communication seems to work.
Yes.
But they also
Yes.
had to learn sign language. So from a music therapy point of view, so the patient comes through and they obviously learn that. How do you help the family though? I mean, do they also have to come for therapy? How would they learn what the person is now communicating?
I wouldn't say that what music therapy does is the music is giving them words. It's more a communication of a need and a communication of who you are, a communication of your personality. So unless the child is mentally capable of learning that if I sing do so, it means I'm hungry. A lot of children don't have the mental capacity. A lot of children who are nonverbal don't have the mental capacity to learn cues for specific needs. But we as humans have a need to express who we are. And we use our voices for that, not necessarily words, but we use our voices for that. We use our bodies for that. We use our way of how we are in the world and how we reach out to people or how we present ourselves to people too. We use it all as our voice of telling people who we are. But when somebody is so disabled that they're sitting in a wheelchair or are bedbound, they cannot talk, they can only make sounds. And a lot of times, like when you have cerebral palsy, even the signal to your vocal cords from your brain to your mouth has been affected. So even making these sounds are very difficult. And music therapy, I would rather say, doesn't necessarily replace communication in a way of saying, I need food, or I need a hug, or I need a dry nappy. It rather presents a way for those people to actually have a voice in saying, this is me, this is who I am. It's more a way of showing people, but I can do something. I am a person. I am me. I'm not just somebody in a wheelchair who cannot do anything, who has to be fed, and who makes strange noises. These strange noises can be used to say, this is who I am, if you can just hear me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think you're taking and with good reason, if we take the patient-centric view on it, it's saying you're actually making the patient better, which is obviously the role of therapists. You're making the patient better, making the patient feel more valued, more understood, more all of those things. And if, again, in my mind, if I think of it, it's like when people are not heard, then there's behavioral issues. So even a child,
Yes.
if they're always acting out in a certain way, it normally means that there's something else bothering them. Maybe the subject is too much. Maybe they can't get the concepts, and then they start, what other
Acting
people view
out.
as naughtiness, or whatever it is. But it normally starts with something else that's wrong. So in this way, what I love about what you said, especially the dementia idea, is you're saying at a fundamental level, you can use music to be able to reach people like that. And basically, if you can help and reach them and they feel better about it, they're going to be better holistically, and other people around them would be seeing them as better. Is that a good way to explain it as well?
It's a good way to see it. But when you start looking at trying to rectify relationships in families, So when you asked how can you help the parents of these children, or how can you help the family members of the people who has dementia, music therapy can help with that because it works with relationships. So you won't necessarily help with the verbal or signal communication, but you can work with how are they together with each other. How, if somebody acts in a certain way, or like you said, a child would act out because they're not feeling heard on a certain way, that you can help with those relationships where you can actually show the parent, but if the child is acting out like this and sounding like this and behaving like this, it can probably mean whatever the reason behind the acting or the sounding is. And so as music therapists, we would go look for what it is behind that acting. And if you do it within family therapy or within relationship therapy, then the caregiver or the parent can be part of that process and get to know the client just so much better.
I like that. And then, I mean, I know Shaz, with, when we were discussing the show, we normally send an outline, and she mentioned like anxiety and depression. Can you take us through, I mean, like, so how would music therapy, and again, to make it a bit more tangible and say, this is how the space would work. Can you take us through? So if someone is struggling with anxiety or depression, how would music therapy benefit them as you've seen it?
So basically, anxiety and depression has triggers a lot of the times. So common triggers would be divorce or separation from a relationship, financial problems, physical disease, problems at home, losing your job, marital problems, etc., etc. So a lot of times somebody who falls into a depressive state has been triggered by something, is a situational depressive state, rather than a clinical diagnosis of major depressive disorder. And you can use active or receptive techniques when somebody presents with these anxiety or depression, because a lot of times anxiety and depression go together. When you're depressed, you're anxious. So with your active techniques, we use a lot of improvisation. And it can be used when the client cannot articulate these difficult feelings. When you cannot talk about it, when you cannot say, but I'm feeling this and this and this and this, because a lot of times we've lost the ability to name our emotions, to accurately name our emotions. And by expressing it through the music, it's a way of naming it, and a way of then finding that specific emotion in the music and then processing it through the music. With the improvisation, you can connect with somebody in a improvised dialogue. So this can improvise dialogue with instruments or with vocal sounds. And this improvised dialogue, so let's say when you hit a drum, you can hit it softly, you can hit it loud, you can hit it repeatedly, you can hit it with lots and lots of energy, or you can hit it slow and without energy. And that tells the therapist what's going on with you, how you are making this music. Then you can engage in a dialogue with this client with an instrument, by if the client just plays it softly and slowly, you can answer the client and see what will the client's reaction be to this answer. And you can switch it up. You can answer it with something energetic and see what is the client doing. what is the reaction? What is the response to how you're answering with your dialogue? And it flows very organically because it's a dialogue of feelings, not a dialogue of words. A dialogue of expressing yourself rather than saying, I'm feeling a little blue and I am this and this and this and this happened. Because the moment you start talking about what happened at home and what is going on, you're not getting to the heart of the feelings, you're staying cognitive. And the way of getting to your feelings, the way of getting to your heart is to get away from your cognitive space, to get into your emotional space, into your being space. A lot of our thinking in our cognitive space tends to override our feelings. It's called ego strength. We need it. We need our minds to keep us in check so that we can function in the world. But when you're in therapy, you need your mind to allow you to get to your emotions. And a lot of times, our minds don't, especially in talk therapy. Okay, so sorry, in depression, there's a term called anhedonia. So that is when the person loses their enjoyment of things. It's a loss of pleasure in daily activities, a loss of the things that you found pleasurable. So a lot of times music can bring back just that, even if it's just a little bit, a flicker of experiencing pleasure in something. And then you can build on that and you can start getting the building on finding things pleasurable again. Even if it's just you, of course, it doesn't work in leaps and bounds and today I had music therapy and tomorrow I'm cured. It's a process and it's building blocks and you work bit by bit and piece by piece. And it's a collaborative process between the client and the therapist to find those emotions, to find how can we express those emotions, how can we process those emotions, how can we find ways of overcoming and living through and finding pleasure again. When you think of anxiety, sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'm not giving you any time.
It's all perfect. It's all perfect because it gets us to understand it as well. So I think, for us, it's more how do we ask the right questions so that we can, almost like access, the knowledge and the experience that you have around the topic. But you were saying about anxiety?
So for anxiety, it's very much when people is anxious the whole time, they need to find a space and a place where they can just let go. Because anxiety is very much a holding on. It's very much a control. It's holding on. It's keeping everything together. And just finding a space, a minute, a half an hour of being able to let go is very important because then you can start with the building blocks again. So for anxiety, I would say that music therapy can offer a space of letting go, of breathing again, of trying to release this absolute tension that keeps you so wound up. And as we all know, music can do it. Music can help you to relax. And the music therapist is then, of course, clinically trained to find that music that will help you let go, because what the music that can make me relax and let go is not necessarily the same for you. Maybe you have a very traumatic memory with a piece of music that's, for me, just an amazing piece of music. So if I were to play this and this traumatic memory pops up, if you're not clinically trained to handle these things, how do you handle it? If a client sits in front of you and you played a piece of music and all of a sudden all this trauma is here. So, sorry, I just wanted to stress that it's very important in these things when I talk about especially receptive techniques and so on, that somebody has to be clinically trained to use the music for any specific means. I have found in my talking about music therapy with lots of different people, I have found a lot of people who use music therapeutically and then claim that it's music therapy, and it's not, because they are not clinically trained to use the music. And music can be therapeutic for a lot of things. Even for you, if you just listen to your music at home, it's therapeutic. It has a therapeutic effect, yes, but it doesn't make you a music therapist. Does that make sense? So I've come across a lot of people who say that they are doing music therapy and they don't have the training, which can be very harmful and very detrimental because you don't know the things that is clinically happening in the space, in the therapeutic space, and in the client's mind and in the body. So I just had to put that in there.
No, don't apologize. I think it's very important for people to also, if you are looking for a music therapist or you are going down that route, to make sure that you are looking at somebody who is certified and properly trained, because music can be really great, but it can also be very detrimental. If, like you said, you don't know how to deal when that trauma comes up, if it's not in a clinical situation. So
exactly.
Just as an example, from a personal note, I cannot listen to the song "Let's Go Fly a Kite" from Mary Poppins. I burst into tears. I have no idea why. It's just one of those things. So I could imagine how harmful that could be in a non-therapeutic setting, where whatever that comes up and whoever the person on the other end is actually doesn't understand what's happening. So I think it's very important that we do look at making sure that you see somebody who is certified.
Yes.
I did have one other question that I did want to ask you. So music it's an expression. It can either be loud or it can be quiet. It can be fast. It can be erratic. How would music therapy help somebody with almost sensory or auditory processing disorders, where sounds are too loud for them? Would music therapy be something that could help them adjust or begin to start to work with that, reduce that sensory overload around sound?
Yes, I believe that music therapy could, because music isn't just loud. Music can be a lot of it's called something vitality affects. So the vitality affects of music is when you put an emotional quality, a moving quality. If you say music is soothing, then the vitality affect, the affect of the music is soothing. So when somebody has auditory or sensory processing issues, yes, it could be that certain types of music and certain ways of making music could be too much for them. But there are ways of making music, and there are ways of using music to overcome and to sensitize, if that makes sense, somebody to the auditory or the sensory processing disorder. It's very interesting. So when you look at auditory processing disorder, there's actually a lot of controversy around it, because a lot of people say that if if somebody is diagnosed with auditory processing disorder, central auditory processing disorder, this person went through a battery of tests and they cannot understand what is being said to them. They're not processing what is being said. But if you look at those tests, according to research, it doesn't just involve what they hear. It's normally a speech thing. So it's that processing the speech can be not, it involves so much more than just hearing. It involves processing the words, understanding the words, processing the nuances in the sound, processing. It's a very cognitive process. So a lot of people feel that auditory processing disorder has a lot to do with attention and focus and concentration. Now, I'm not talking about when people cannot handle loud sounds. That's more a sensory thing. But when people feel that, when people have been diagnosed with central auditory processing disorder, my mouth won't work anymore. Then it's got a lot to do with the message from what they're hearing being processed in the brain to make sense. And a lot of research has gone into it, and there's a lot of controversy where they say that maybe it is not because they don't have hearing loss. Maybe it is because they're struggling to understand the language. Maybe it is because they're struggling to pay the proper attention to listen to what the message is. And that is definitely something that music can address. When it comes to sensory issues, your different senses, of course, it's not just hearing, it's feeling, it's smelling, it's seeing. I've had a client who was absolutely overwhelmed with loud and big sounds. It scared her so much. And she also had a tactile sensory processing where touching things, feeling the texture of things, some things, and you get it a lot with autistic children as well, where when you tactile, where you feel things, some things are just absolutely grossing you out, and other things are acceptable to touch. And with all these things, with the different music instruments and the different ways of making music, music can actually encompass a lot of these sensory issues, and you can design therapeutic interventions with music therapy to address those issues. I'm sorry, can you hear my dog barking? Is it bothering you?
No, it's okay.
I don't know how to get her quiet.
No, it's fine. I mean, again, that keeps it real, but hopefully she doesn't do it too much.
I can start shouting at her, but I don't think you will like that.
We can meet for a bit. Let's see. But you know what I liked about what you said. But again, this is something I'm going to go down now. But you said it's almost like, with sensory integration and auditory stuff. There's almost like that concentration part. Would that then be a rationale for the medication? Because I'm thinking, so what the medication does is helps them to concentrate. Does that make sense?
I cannot talk about medication. Unfortunately. Okay. I don't have the knowledge of medication. Okay, cool. That's definitely not my scope of practice.
No, I'm just trying to put it together in my mind. So obviously the medication would help the patient to concentrate, and that would help with the sensory stuff so that they can be in that space. So yeah, just something on my side.
It's possible. I don't know much about the medication.
Okay, cool.
I can tell you about a specific technique that is being used. It's called auditory attention plus communication. So this is a technique. It's a neurologic music therapy technique where they actually in research use brain scans to find the functioning of the brain, fMRI, where they look at the functioning of the brain and the different interventions. And the auditory attention plus communication is where you give specific tasks to the accompaniment of music. So a basic procedure would be to either stimulate sustained or selective attention through hearing. So sustained attention would be, you would play a piece of music and you would require to say, okay, so when the big drum goes kaboom, you throw the ball to your friend. So it requires the child to listen to the piece of music. Wait, where's the big kaboom? And the moment you hear the big kaboom, you throw the ball. And for them, it's like a game, but it actually stimulates that attention. And it's sustained attention because they have to listen to the whole piece of music. And with musical cues, they have to look for the musical cues. Then there's selective attention where you have many different instruments and you ask the child to focus on just one instrument and ignore the others. And that also has a lot to do with the processing disorder where people struggle to hear one voice out of many voices, let's say in a classroom or in a social situation. So in a way of trying to train the brain to selectively focus on one aspect of hearing, of what you're hearing, you can start doing it with music. So if you were playing a piece of classical music, you would ask the client to listen to the violins. What's the melody line of the violin? Or if you look at something like Peter and the Wolf, which is a classical music story, and every different animal in this classical music story has a specific instrument. So every animal has a specific sound. So you can ask the child, let's listen to the oboe. And I think the oboe is the duck. So what is the oboe saying? So behind the oboe, there's lots of different other sounds, but you focus on that one instrument. And that can help with training the brain to listen to just one voice and to distinguish the one voice from the many voices around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see that. I mean, I see that, and the word that kind of comes to mind for me is like zoning in. You're zoning into that part. So you're almost like focusing, to that. And I think that's the part, like where, the attention starts happening. Because as you said, in your classroom setting, there's so many things happening, and this person is fidgeting with that, and the other one's doing this. And, the child is, the teacher is just one of those, as you said, instruments, playing in that orchestra, and they can't zone in to the teacher. And I can kind of see how that technique would work. I think I want to say, with the previous question around the medication as well, what's interesting for me as we've done the show is to see how different therapists like yourself and, like we had a clinical psychologist that spoke to us recently, Jeannie Cavey, about hypnotherapy. And again, it's like, bypassing the cognitive to get through to the subconscious to be able to assist.
Yes.
What's interesting for me is to see these different therapists, speak about it. And then, for us to almost like start saying, okay, that's probably why they said that. And, so we learn a lot from that. I mean, it's amazing, and although as you, quite honestly said, you can't say actually, does the medication help? But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, that's probably why they said that part. And so normally it's just an opinion. I did want to ask though, so from a sensory integration and auditory processing, is there any merits to the child actually understanding music and doing music? And again, I'm not saying, should they go to a music therapist? I'm just saying, is there any tangible benefits to that child, almost like learning to play a music instrument, if they can, like you quite pointedly told us, if they have the mental capacity for that, obviously. Is there any merits to that?
Yes, there's many researched merits to playing an instrument. to actually actively engaging with music. And of course, if you're looking at your processing disorders, then it should be within a music therapy context, because a music teacher doesn't have the clinical know-how of how to engage this child with music. But if you're looking at just your normal early childhood development, then, oh my goodness, there has been so many benefits of learning music. The structural changes in the brain has been researched, and with learning an instrument, how the processing of sound has helped a very broad array of functions in the brain, such as reading ability. How engaging with music actually helps a child to read better. How a child gets better verbal learning and retention abilities from auditory memory. So if you learn to play an instrument, it will help you to learn to listen better. Or a lot of the executive functioning in the brain, where working in memory has been promoted, the conscious control of action. So that is with your executive function. So you can say, I will use this finger to press on this note. You know, when you start thinking of learning to play the piano, to learn to use all your fingers differently. If a child learns that, and learning to use the fingers or body movements, control of action, separate from one liggaamsdeel.
Body parts. Yeah.
Body parts separate from another.
Yeah, I got that one.
Sorry, sometimes I think in both languages.
No, I actually love that, but yeah, cool.
There's the capacity to ignore irrelevant information. So let's say you learn to play in an ensemble and you have to wait for your turn to play. You learn, but okay, I'm not going to listen to this part of the ensemble. I have to wait for this violin to play this note so that I can start playing. So you learn how to ignore irrelevant information. You learn how to inhibit incorrect automatic responses. So if your body tells you, okay, but now is the time to play, but the timing of the music says no, 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 you learn how to inhibit that response. You learn how to tell yourself, no, wait, it's not my turn yet, and now. Also, it helps with problem solving. Learning an instrument, learning to read music, learning to play music can help with problem solving. It can help with cognitive flexibility, to adjust to changing task demands. So if you had to, one person is expecting you to play Ringe-Ringe-Rosies on the piano, and you can play Ringe-Ringe-Rosies, but the other person is expecting you to play a classical piece of music. That is changing task demands. So you learn how to be flexible for this. Self-regulation is promoted, sustained attention, goal-directed behavior, cognitive flexibility, cohesion within a group. If you're learning to play group music, it also it's emotionally beneficial, because you're learning a skill. So by learning a skill, you actually start feeling, but I can do something. I am able to do something. So it promotes your self-concept. It promotes identity creation, because a lot of people use their abilities of doing things to create their identity. Oh my goodness, it contributes to social inclusion, to feeling I belong, because you belong with a group of musicians. You know, so yes, sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole now. But yes, learning to play an instrument, being able to actively participate, and not necessarily just in music therapy, but being able to actively participate in music is very, very beneficial.
Okay, I'm glad I asked that actually, and I know it may be on topic or not, but I think I know actually another family. I mean, like, you know, for each of their 3 children, it was almost mandatory, you know, that they each had to learn, you know, a musical instrument, and I thought that was amazing, you know, that discipline. And they're not a music orientated family. It was just, you know, the parents just said, you know, that's what you need to do, and I thought that was interesting. I'm going to push this one a little bit more and ask, for a child, is there a music instrument that you would recommend? But I know it's obviously dependent on each child and all of that stuff. But is there something that you find that is both practical as well as, you know, it kind of makes sense? Does that make?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, no. I'm not a music teacher, so I can't say what's going to be a good instrument for a child to learn. As a music therapist, we use any and all instruments. And it doesn't matter how you use the instrument in music therapy, any sound you're producing is acceptable. So I'm sorry that I don't have the knowledge of learning specific instruments to say your child should learn this instrument.
Okay.
I can't answer that.
Okay, cool. As a parent, I always think, I mean, like, you know, the logistics of having a piano, it's like normally a problem. You know, the logistics of having drums is normally a problem. And I think that's where that question was kind of coming from.
And music instruments are expensive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say this. I mean, so I started, you know, with music in probably grade 5. You know, we called it standard 3, grade 5 to grade 9. And, you know, like, and you get to use the recorder, and, you know, you get to, you know, like, learn music theory and stuff like that. But I think for anyone listening to that and you're obviously going to defer from this, you know, based on the conversation we already had, but it definitely didn't sound like therapy, you know, like, you know, for anyone listening to that type of stuff coming out of, you know, my recorders in the early years. But as you said, I mean, it's just the process is therapeutic, you know, and the process is just, you know, good for everyone. So I love this conversation.
It's amazing how, sorry.
No, go for it.
I just wanted to say it's amazing how your way of thinking about music and about what is good, what is bad, what is tolerable changes once you look at it through a music therapy lens. Sorry, the airplane is coming over the house now.
I can hear that. Yeah.
I'm in Kempton Park, so the airplanes are everywhere.
Cool. Sure.
Yeah. So I remember before I started doing music therapy, I was, as a musician, you are very judgmental about sound quality and about what you hear, and you want to cringe when you hear certain things. But the moment you put on the music therapy lens, it completely changes the way you think and the way you hear the music. I just had to, when you mentioned the recorder. So if I was a parent and I had to listen to you playing the recorder, I would probably also cringe. But as a music therapist, I would start playing with you and try to develop a therapeutic relationship through that recorder.
No, definitely. I mean, so I only had one more question, and I'll ask Shaz for her closing thoughts. And like with every episode, I mean, this was amazing. I always say, when we start, we're not sure, how the conversation will go, but it's amazing that, we covered so much in my opinion, and it was amazing hearing you speak and giving us that knowledge around it. And then Yeah, but my last question was, do you have to be musically inclined to become a music therapist? I mean,
To be a music therapist, yes. To
okay,
be a client for music therapy, no.
cool.
If you want to go for music therapy and if you want to have music, of course, we believe that everybody is innately musical, as I said. So the musicality isn't in I have learned to play the piano or I can make music. It's the way of being that is musical for the client. But if you want to be a music therapist, you need to be musically inclined so that you can engage musically with your client. If you're not musically inclined, then you have to be able to play instruments, you have to be able to sing, you have to be able to think musically, you have to, you have to be able to recognize the music in somebody else who's not musical to be able to do music therapy.
Okay, that is very important. And the reason I asked that, and obviously, we'll cover that in the, the molding private practice show, but it also gives probably people that are musically inclined another occupation that they can look forward to helping people with. Whereas you don't have to just become a music teacher or a musician. This is probably another avenue which I find fascinating.
It definitely is another avenue of using your love for music. A lot of people become music therapists because they love music, but they also love helping people. So music therapy puts the two together.
Ah, nice. I love that. Again, just like the Hippo Therapy, the occupational therapist, Emma Weinberg, she loved horses and then, it kind of like fitted together. It was amazing. Shaz, on your side, any last questions or comments for Annelet?
No, you stole my last question.
Ah, okay.
I was going to ask the exact same thing. Did you have to be musically inclined to be a music therapist? But you've answered it. And I think it does make a lot of sense that in order to someone and listen to their musical being, you would need to have some sort of musical understanding and background. So yeah, I think Oliver and I were on the same wavelength there.
It was a resonance.
Yeah.
Cool. And Annelet, on your side, anything that you think that we should have asked you, especially bearing in mind the audience. The audience is anyone that's looking for assistance and and goes onto Google and say, I actually I think my child needs help or my sister needs help. I just don't know what to help them with. And I thought the one term that stuck out for me was nonverbal. So if there's anything around that, like as in, you're having issues around communication, maybe it's just not the speech therapist that you need to be looking, in the vicinity around. Maybe it's, music therapists as well. Is there anything that you would say that we should have asked you that we didn't?
Wow. I can say so much more. I feel like I've had absolute verbal diarrhea, but I really feel like I can still say so much more. I think I did mention a lot with the nonverbal with special needs children and with Alzheimer's and dementia, but I also want to mention, because of the times we're living in now, which is a broadly traumatic time. We are living in a pandemic. Our lives have been thrown absolutely upside down. And I think everybody, whether consciously aware of it or not, are suffering from trauma because of this. And a very big thing about trauma is that we don't talk about our trauma. It is something we hide. It is something we have to grin and bear. It is something we have to get through. And because socially we don't talk about our trauma, and even intimately we don't talk about our trauma, we don't learn the language to talk about our trauma. So that is also somewhere where music therapy can help, because you don't have to talk about it. Your trauma can be expressed and healed through music without talking about it. Yeah. So yeah, that is something I really want to also just highlight. And it's not just for adults, it's for children as well. Childhood trauma is such a big thing. We as adults suffer from so many consequences of our childhood traumas, and if you as a parent feel that your child is going through a traumatic time, children don't have the ability to talk about it. They don't have the mental ability to put words to what they're feeling. So that is why people use play therapy, sand therapy, all these different kinds of therapies to get to the emotional side of the child. So yes, look at music therapy, because music therapy has a unique way of immediately zoning in to our emotions.
Wow.
Rather than trying to go cognitively.
Wow. That was really profound. It actually answers and puts the links on many things that I thought about. We love watching Britain's Got Talent and, America's Got Talent. And if you look at some of those, those candidates that come through and how they talk about their early life and what got them to go, becoming a singer or going into music, it definitely answers some of those questions in my mind, in terms of why they did that and how they help, how music helped them. So thanks for that. I think that was amazing. And also thanks for doing this.
Welcome.
It was amazing discussion. We enjoyed every single minute of it. And as you said, we can probably spend with every guest we have on board. They all tell us the same thing. We can spend a lot more time and hopefully we do that, in the future, on another topic or maybe something more pinpointed. But for us, it's almost like just opening up the discussion and putting firstly a term to it and pointing people in the direction that actually I need to speak to Annelet. I love what she said there. And I think she could help me with this. And if it's not Annelet, like if there's someone in Cape Town, maybe looking at someone else, but at least opening up that space and saying, actually, that's where I need to look to. But thanks again for your time. We love this.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
This was amazing.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned and we'll speak to you in the next episode.